everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'm going to be covering the weather for May 6th of 2023. For today you can see that there is a enhanced risk for central Texas and parts of southern Oklahoma, as well as a slight risk through more of Oklahoma as well as central Texas too, with a slight risk for for parts of the northern Midwest. I'm not really sure what to call this region. Mainly this region of the U.S. I'm not really sure what to call it. So there is a slight risk for there, with a pretty large marginal risk around it, as well as a small marginal risk down here. As for our threats for today, we do have more of a increased potential for tornadoes, as well as a small tornado potential for the enhanced risk, as well as a very small tornado potential. I think it's going to be much less than any of these other ones, and I'll show you why. But we do have a 5% chance of up there, or a 5% risk. But as for the wind, we do have a 30% chance, a 30% risk, as well as a hatched area for significant damage or significant wind gusts, as well as a 15% around that, and a 5%, and not really as much up here, but still 15%, as well as a 5% down there. And as for the hail, we're definitely going to see the potential for very large to potentially gorilla-sized hail, for especially this area, mainly this area, where we have a 30% risk with a 15% around that, and a hatched area for significant hail, as well as a hatched area for significant hail, and very large to potentially gorilla-sized hail here too, with that significant hatched threat. But let's go to the pivotal weather models. I'm going to cover each small, marginal, and enhanced and slight risk one at a time, starting with the enhanced risk. We do have a little bit of convection in the area left over from yesterday that is expected to move through very large amounts of instability and humidity, but without a trigger to allow for storm development. It's likely to just fall apart. But then by the time it gets to Louisiana, those same air parcels, it does encounter sea breezes along the coast to allow for more storm development and the potential for a very large hail too. Then we have some storm development very late, expected very late this week. I did start with the small marginal threat, but even though I was trying to start with the enhanced threat, for the enhanced threat, storm development is expected to start very late in the afternoon and continue overnight and continue eastward into Arkansas, and as rain, but still the potential for not in Arkansas, but mainly in this area, the potential for very large to gorilla-sized hail. So let's go to our instability here. No, actually, let's go back to our humidity. Or no, I keep changing my mind here, but let's go out into a less zoomed out view here. Let's go let's look at our wind dynamics here. So we have this trough here. We do have this trough here that is moving through the area with very subtle forcing on the lower levels throughout the Texas area. Just very, very subtle forcing throughout the area, very subtle forcing throughout that area. I know I keep repeating myself, but that is expected to continue northwestward along that trough, is the shortwave trough through the area that's expected for the 5% chance, 5% risk for tornadoes throughout that area, and then dip back southward by tomorrow. But that's going to be the main trigger for severe weather in that area of the United States. In that area of the United States is that trough there. That's going to be the main trigger, as well as the subtle forcing down in the enhanced area. But let's go to our humidity here. Let's look at our dew points. So we do have this. We do have large amounts of humidity throughout eastern Oklahoma and eastern Texas, as well as the majority of Louisiana and eastern western Mississippi and the majority of Arkansas, with dew points in the 70s, very high amounts of humidity, as well as very deep amounts of humidity here with the dew points in the 60s, right next to dew points in the 20s and 30s, with the like right next to each other. You can see this dry line here developing with the because of the very subtle forcing with that trough that's moving through the area, putting pressure on that humidity and developing it into a dry line to kick off that storm development along that dry line. But let's go to our instability and why there's going to be a really the potential for large hail down throughout that area. Let's go into a more zoomed in view of the southern central United States. So we do have large amounts of humidity from what we saw on Thursday. There was very moderate amounts of instability that exploded by Friday, and I wish I could have had a forecast out for Friday, but I just couldn't because I had plans. But there's still large amounts of humidity left over from that just explosion with simulated levels of 5,000 and even 6,000 in some areas. That is expected to decrease over time and then increase again by the late afternoon with very large amounts of humidity, instability, especially throughout this area and this area, and overall just large amounts of humidity overall in levels through the 4,000, upper 4,000s, or mid 4,000s and lower 4,000s, with even simulated values of 5,000. I don't think we're actually going to see values of 5,000 anywhere. I think that's unlikely. But there is large amounts of instability that is going to allow for large amounts of hail, large amounts of hail, and the potential for very large hail and maybe even gorilla hail. But if we look at let's go down to the surface humidity. Let's go down a little bit towards the surface. So we do have the instability left over, and then we also have the explosion of instability towards the afternoon, the later hours of the afternoon, primarily in this area where our tornado threat was. Large amounts of surface instability in the area to allow for those surface air parcels to rise from the surface and allow for tornado development with surface levels in the close to simulated values of close to 2,000 in some areas, in just overall in the 100s and above. So very large amounts of surface instability is expected, as well as lapse rates. Let's go to the lapse rates here. We do have large amounts of lapse rates moving through the area that is going to mix up all the humidity and instability and convect in the mixed layer, allow for the possibility of a very well mixed layer throughout the Texas area with those very large amounts of lapse rates, and furthermore supporting storm development. But then let's look at the wind shear that will also influence and tie together the tornado potential. So we have what is left over from yesterday, where that decreases through much of today, and then increases again by the afternoon hours. And you can see it primarily in this area. There is some moderate to potentially high amounts of wind shear through mainly the 30s and 20s, and simulated values of 40 knots in some very small areas, but I don't think that's going to be likely. Is primarily going to stay in the 30s and 40s or 30s and 20s, because it's such a small area on the models, but it could be possible. But then let's go to what am I trying to say here? Let's go to let's back out here. Let's go to the slight risk area that's up here. Um, so we have let's go to the reflectivity. We do have storm development left over from I think the storms that were in Nebraska yesterday continuing eastward. But then we also have storm development through by the late hours of the afternoon here today, and continuing overnight, as well as storms are also expected to continue overnight for the Texas area as well. But let's look at the instability here. If we go to the instability, you can see there's not really much, but then you can see lots of large amounts of instability from the south is blown up by that trough to the northern areas, with values in the 3000s and potentially values in the 4000s too, especially with that band that you saw there. This band with the low 4000s, but mainly upper 3000s. But then let's look at the surface instability that will allow for surface air parcels to rise up and allow for tornadic development. By late Saturday and Sunday, we do have more moderate but still sufficient surface instability throughout those bands, primarily in that area. I would expect for tornadic development to occur in the low 100s and upper 10s. But then let's go to the wind shear, which will actually allow for storm development. We do have actually no. Let's back up to lapse rates. I'm getting ahead of myself. We do have high amounts of lapse rates moving through that same area that will allow for storm development in a very well mixed layer. But then let's go to the humidity here. Let's go to the dew points. We do have a humidity in the 60s, dew points in the 60s. We do have some areas where it is in the 70s, but I think that's going to be unlikely in the real world because it's, again, such a small area, but it could be possible. But we do have strong, lots of humidity that's being drawn up from the southern region by that trough as it blows, blows along northwestward. That is so. There's sufficient humidity to allow for storm development. So we got that down. But now we can continue to the wind shear. But again, that instability, large amounts of instability, it could allow for large to gorilla hail to develop throughout that area. But then let's go to the wind shear here. When the threat late this afternoon, you can see large amounts of wind shear here throughout is present throughout much of that area, with values in the 40s and 30s, which will allow for a more increased threat of tornadoes than say the further south in Texas, as well as the surface instability and overall instability, which will allow for tornado development more so than what we saw down south, but also with a large amounts of. I think, yeah. So I'm repeating myself. Sorry about that, but again, wind shear more so than further down south to allow for a more increased threat for tornadic development. So that's really all I had to cover. But just for fun, let's look at the significant tornado parameter, where we could see the potential for tornadic development. Let's go to a large view of the United States. We do see that there is large amounts of a significant tornado parameter throughout much of that area, as well as down south, So, I mean, this is just for fun. This ties it together based on other parameters like the wind shear, and can give you an idea of where you could see more increased threats for tornadoes, but it's not really something you want to rely on. But now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator. Join the Discord for updates on Project Gladiator, and hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow with Weekly Overlook.